Fortunately, Şebnem Yaren will explain us how to use time efficiently before and during the conference. And let me read her bio. My name is Şebnem Yaren, and I'm the 19-year-old freshman at Boğaziçi University at the Department of Management. I realized my passion for MUN about 3 years ago, and I've been actively attending conferences since then under various titles such as a delegate, chair, academic assistant, undersecretary general, and deputy secretary general. Furthermore, as an active member of the Boğaziçi MUN community, I'm also a writer, editor on different issues of Boğaziçi MUN's monthly bulletin, Present. I'm delighted to be part of this highly educational and influential International MUN Summit and work with some of the finest and most qualified people in Turkey's MUN community. So, Şebnem Yaren, stage is yours.
Thank you. Sorry in advance for my voice, and I have a bit of a runny nose. I don't have the virus. It's not that. It's just I have a runny nose, so sorry in advance. Okay, so let's begin. As Azra Nur said, I'll be with you during the time management session of the summit. I hope, first of all, that you enjoy this presentation and it's helpful to you. Okay, so let's just get into it. So let's talk about what time management is, first of all. Now, by definition, in its simplest terms, time management is the process of dividing your time between your activities. And from the moment we wake up and check the time to when we put our phones down at night, we plan all our actions according to time, right? So it implements itself in our everyday actions without us even realizing it. And we can conclude from that time management is something that holds such an important place in our actions, and that must be even more important to our MUN conferences as well. Now, let's talk about that, time management in MUN. Now, when it comes to time management in MUN conferences, there are two main timestamps that go into managing your time. There's the before, and then there's the during the conference. Now, the before part of the conference, the time management is this phase is for you to prepare for the upcoming conference, learn about your committee, your country and position, your agenda items, and this also includes the logistics of the conference. So where your conference is going to take place and how to get there, etc. This part includes all of that preparation. And then there's the during part. During the conference phase is the 3 or 4 day period where you need to plan your time to your benefit the most, because this part is where you show all the preparation you've done and just participate in the conference in general, right? So if you use your time efficiently during this period, you'll have a successful final paper, a successful committee, and most importantly, you'll have fun during the 4 days that you're, the three or 4 days that you're in the conference. Now, let's talk about that before the conference phase. After you get your allocations, there are 3 steps that you should follow to prepare for the conference and do your research. Now, the first is committee research. The committee research can consist of understanding what job your committee serves in the United Nations or any collective body that it is a part of. You can research what kind of topics have been in the agenda of this committee in the past, which measures it took in regards to those issues, what it's eligible and non-eligible to do, and what its general purpose is in general in that collective body that it is a part of. The second is the agenda research, which is regardless of what your committee in your country is, you need to learn about what you're going to discuss in your committee. So this research includes what causes the issue that your committee is going to discuss, who it affects, how it affects the world, and what are its consequences, etc. So this is very important as well, to understand what's going on in your committee for the next upcoming 4 days. And the last is your country or your position research, which is to understand what your country or position stands on the issues in general, what your country has done in the past regarding those issues, or what it supports and doesn't support. This essentially gives you the incentive to know what motions you're going to vote against or in favor of, what clauses you're going to accept or not, depending on your country's policies. Now let's continue. So while you're researching, you can follow some simple steps to save time, since this research is a very comprehensive research and it can be hard to manage that time. Now, the first is you need to use the study guide excessively. Now, this is important because the study guide is prepared solely for you to understand what your committee's job is, what the agenda items really mean, and sometimes even includes some country stances on the issues as well. So it's highly expected of you to elaborate on it carefully. And it is a very easy research for you to gain a general idea. Second is you need to give maximum a day for each step. This is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll say it again. If you give more than a day to any of the research items, the country, position, agenda, etc., it can get more complicated and it can confuse you. So just a day to gain a general idea on the issue is enough. And lastly, you brainstorm some solution ideas. Now, brainstorming means just thinking about or drawing some possible solution ideas to maybe present in your committee. And this is just it's solely just a basic understanding process for you to comprehend what you're researching better. Now let's move on with during the conference phase. Now, before the conference phase has ended, you have done all your preparations, and now the conference day has come. Let's talk about what's going to happen in those 4 days. Now, in regular conferences, there are such things called motions, and motions are actions proposed by delegates to direct the debate. And motions are given during the moderated caucuses, which are discussion environments where you're sitting down and you're raising your placards to gain a right to speak, and your committee director allows you to do so. So it's in its same moderated process by your committee directors. And you can give motions during these moderated caucuses. And giving motions in the committee is the most efficient way to manage your time in your session. Now, as some first-timer delegates may think giving motions is kind of scary. They may think that, but don't be afraid to give motions, because motions are possibly the only efficient and easy way to direct the committee in your favor, and also to allocate the required time for each debate topic without wasting any time. So if you give motions yourself, you can allocate the time according to you if it's reasonable and the board and committee agrees as well. Let's continue about giving motions. Now, giving motions, as I've said, can be tricky. You can say, is my motion relevant? Will the other delegates approve? Is this enough time for this topic, etc.? Many questions can search through your mind, but to prevent those from stopping you for giving motions, here are some tips for allocating the optimum time for the optimum motion. Now, first is give longer time motions in the beginning for the broad topics. Now, at the start of the debates, more general issues are discussed in the committee to really dig out the key subjects and discuss them thoroughly, so that later on you don't waste time on it. But also, to execute this process smoothly, you need to give longer time motions, because they would serve this purpose. Secondly, following up on that first one, you need to give shorter time motions for specific and subtitled issues. Now, it's pretty self-explanatory, but as you move on to more specific issues, more to the point and shorter time motions could really come in handy to discuss the not so detailed subjects and move on from them quickly. And third is the most important one: check if you're discussing everything before moving to the writing process. This is most important part of the moderated caucuses, because it's to make sure that you're discussing everything that was specified in the study guide thoroughly before moving to the writing process. Because if you keep missing points and try to write documents, your board will warn you and you have to go back to square one, which will end up in a lot of wasted time also. After it's made sure that everything in the study guide is discussed in the moderated caucuses, after you've run over everything in the study guide, the time is for you to now start your writing process in the unmoderated caucuses. As you can see in the picture, unmoderated caucuses is different, where you stand up, you use your electronic devices, you can freely discuss with your colleagues, etc. Now, let's talk about the unmoderated caucuses and how you're going to manage your time in that. Now, it can be hard to manage the time in moderated caucuses in terms of organizing people and putting together a successful document, but here are some tips to help you with that. The first is recruit or be a part of a group to co-write a final document with via message papers. Now, to save time from forming too many of the same documents and avoid any merging processes, you need to get in touch with your colleagues during moderated caucuses via message papers or during the coffee breaks to form a largest possible block to work on a single final document at a time. Secondly, try to organize you and your colleagues' possible clauses as much as possible in the moderated caucuses via message papers. This correlates with the first item, but while you're debating in moderated caucuses, try to discuss your possible clauses via message papers with your fellow delegates to limit the face-to-face clause exchange process in the unmoderated caucus as much as possible, so that you can allocate that time instead of discussing face-to-face. You can allocate that time to your writing processes. Thirdly, you need to start the writing process with maximum 2 people at a time to avoid too many similar documents and unnecessary divisions. This goes with the first two, but correlating with the first step, too many people working on documents creates similar but insufficiently detailed documents. So working on one would create more deep and detailed documents. And fourth, you need to make sure to run the document through your fellow delegates before the final submission. Now, this is because before the document submissions to the committee board, make sure to run it with the sponsors and as much delegates as possible to make sure that they agree with it or at least want to debate on it, so that you don't have to work on it time and time again after any rejections or failures of documents. Now, let's talk about the last part of the writing process. After submission, there is the amendment process for some final documents, as you may know. And to make the amendment procedure as fast as possible, you need to make sure, as I've stated in the past, to review the documents with delegates before submitting, so that if anyone has an amendment in mind, you can directly implement it to your document during the unmonitored caucuses without going through all the voting processes and introducing the amendment, etc. If you still want to make the amendment while the document is on the floor, make sure that it is required by messaging to some delegates before submission, so that it is relevant according to your committee, so that it doesn't end up wasting time on all the voting and introducing the amendment process as well. This is also an example amendment sheet. And lastly, let's summarize what we've discussed during this period before and during the conference, right? Now, the key to efficient time management in MUN includes 4 key elements that you for sure need to implement to manage your time efficiently. First is preparation and research. As I've stated before the conference phase, you need to plan and do your preparation and research in advance so that you know what you're discussing in the committee, know what the issues are, know what you're going to support or not, know what countries are going to do, etc. So you need to make sure that you do that. The second is, as I've stated, the motion importance. Organize motion giving in touch with your beforehand research. Even if you don't propose a motion, it can come in handy because you're going to know which ones to second, which ones to vote against. And giving motions correlating with your research before can really direct the committee not only in your favor, but in the favor of the whole committee as well. So this is very important. The third is keeping in touch with your fellow delegates. As I've stated in the previous slides, you need to keep in touch with your colleagues, both in moderated and unmoderated caucuses, because no one can monitor a whole committee's time by themselves. The time management in crowded places, not just in MUN, in crowded places, can only be done by cooperation. So you need to cooperate with your fellow delegates via message papers, in coffee breaks, etc. And lastly, you need to organize your work in every aspect of it. Organizing saves you time, period. Like that's a known issue, and especially in MUN, organizing your tangible work, your clauses, your ideas written down, your colleagues' additions to documents, or just the documents in general, and organizing what you're writing and what you're producing, essentially, in general, even in debates, is the key to saving time when discussing and finding solutions to worldwide issues that are being discussed in your committees. So this was my presentation on time management and how to use your time efficiently. Now I see in the chat that we have a question, but if you have any other questions, you may also raise your hand from the participants part, and our co-moderator Azra can unmute you, and you can ask questions with using your voice. But so if you have any questions, go ahead, and while you're thinking about them, I'll answer this one. Someone asked, how can we make sure that during running our document through our colleagues before the final submission, our document is not stolen? Now, this is very important because discussing it with your fellow delegates is how you can make sure your document is not stolen, because you can, before starting the writing process, as I've stated, you need to form a block in coffee breaks or message papers. Now, forming a block means essentially forming a group who has the same interests, right? So while you're running through your document with your fellow delegates in your same block, they're not going to steal that from you, because first of all, it will be hard for them to write a document as well. And second of all, they have the same interests as you. Their country has the same stance on the issues as your country. So they're not going to steal that, because your document serves that purpose as well. If there are different blocks in the committee, that means that there are going to be different final papers. So they're not going to steal from you because their final paper serves a different purpose, and that's why they formed a different block. So that also saves you from any stolen documents. How many someone also, I hope that answers your question. Someone also asked, how many days do we need to have to get prepared for the conference as a delegate? You know, yeah, the allocations are sometimes late. What is the ideal time? Now, personally, and from my own conference as well, the allocations are, it's so much easier for you to, for a conference to send allocations late, but it's very efficient to send allocations at least 1 week in advance. The latest should be 1 week. You can send them before, but I think 1 week is the latest that it is ideal. And after you get your allocations, let's assume that they arrived 1 week before. The preparation phase should cost you 3 or 4 days maximum, because the 3 days could be your research on the committee agenda and your country, and the last day could be just before your just before the first day of your conference. You can look up on all your research to remind you what you've researched, and to remind you what's going to be done in the committee in general. So 3 to 4 days is I think enough for the preparation phase. Someone asked, how can we be part of a group in that chaos area? You're totally right. That's why I ask all of you to, try to form a group via message papers or during coffee breaks, during the unmoderated caucus, moderated caucus part, because when you move on to the unmoderated caucus and you don't have a block, it's very hard to find someone and ask them, you know, what's your block, etc. It forms a chaos, as you've stated. So it's very important for you to ask your fellow delegates via message papers or in coffee breaks, you know, do you have a block, or are you trying to form a block? I can help you, etc., to save time from that chaos area. Someone asked, are there any usual websites, links, or news agencies that we may use during our research process that you suggest? Now, of course, there are many useful websites, links, or news agencies. I personally try to use the library of Oxford University. It is free. You can research anything you want on that. I personally try to use academic resources to make sure that my research and my what I've researched is correct and not anything that is freely searching upon the internet. But you can also use for general research to gain an idea, not like academically. You can of course always use Wikipedia. You can always use the various news agencies, New York Times, The New Yorker, The Economist. These are some newspapers in the US, or The Sun, and some newspapers in UK as well, so that you can gain an idea on what has affected the news in terms of this issue as well. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, but if there's a few more, I think I can take them, Azra, if you let me, if I have time.
Yeah, you still have 2 minutes. So.
Okay, so we still have 2 minutes, guys. If there's any more questions, I can take them. And if there's not, we can just log off. So I'll wait 1 minute if you have any questions to think about.
Do not hesitate to ask.
Yeah, don't hesitate. And if you have any questions, not only about time management or just in MUN in general, you can always ask them. You know, this is a platform for you to learn anything about MUN, not just what we present to you. So if you have any questions as well about in general anything, go ahead. Someone asked crisis or GA. Now, personally, I really like General Assembly committees. I know it may seem that I'm a boring person, but I've just done too many crisis committees in the past that I'm just tired of them. And I think General Assembly committees serve UN's purpose better. Although crisis committees are fun, believe me, I've been part of so much. But I think General Assembly committees is the best, because I'm probably like older than most of you, so I'm just an old guy. Yeah, thank you for listening. Someone asked, do you have any suggestions to get awards during the conference? Now, of course, there are awards in MUN conferences, and my general suggestion about awards could be try to present yourself to the committee board as helpful to the committee as possible. The more helpful you are to the committee in general, the more your possibility of earning an award rises. So just know that you're presenting your board, that you're helpful and that you're trying. So even if you don't succeed necessarily about your final document or in your motions, etc., to show that you're trying to your committee board is essentially enough for you to earn at least an honorable mention. At least that's what I do when I'm chairing committees, to know that your delegates are trying for your best, because MUN is not about always succeeding 100%. It's about learning as you do so. So don't try to be your 100% the ideal delegate. Just try, and once you go to more conferences, once you try time and time again, don't worry, you'll be the perfect delegate, whatever that is to you, after many experiences. Okay, so thank you all for listening and for making the time on this Saturday morning. I know it's very early. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit, and I hope you join every single presentations, because there are going to be presentations from many experienced and many just qualified people in general. So don't forget to miss that. Don't forget to join that. Sorry, don't miss that.
So
okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Hope to see you in the next session.
Yes, of course. Bye.